Drop by my place this Thursday. I'd like to have a private chat about your performance. I stared at the message for nearly a full minute before flipping my phone screen. Down on the desk. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 39 years old, and I've been working as a senior compliance analyst at Stratford Media Group in Chicago for close to 10 years. I'm not someone who invites trouble or fuels office gossip, but I know inappropriate behavior when I see it. Alyssa Caldwell had joined us 6 months ago as our new director. She came with big names on her resume, 3 major firms, and a reputation for transforming departments. The executive board adored her. She was all about innovation, productivity, and hands-on leadership. What they didn't realize was just how hands-on she intended to be. It started subtly. In our very first one-on-one, she complimented my shirt. "That color really brings out your eyes, Daniel." I gave a polite thank you and steered the conversation back to our compliance reporting. The following week, she brought up my cologne, then asked if I hit the gym regularly, said I looked like I kept in shape. I kept it strictly professional. My answers were short and focused solely on work. But her remarks didn't stop. She found reasons to swing by my office. She'd linger after department meetings, asking follow-up questions that could have easily been emailed. During the Regional Compliance Summit in Milwaukee, she offered to split a cab back to the hotel. I chose the shuttle instead. Then the text messages began. At first, they were after-hours questions about upcoming audits, things that could easily have waited until the next morning. Then came compliments about my work ethic, messages expressing appreciation for how committed I was. Her tone grew increasingly personal. She shared that she was new to Chicago, didn't know many people in the area outside of work. Last Tuesday, she sent a photo. Nothing explicit, but entirely inappropriate. She was in activewear, captioned, "About to go for an evening jog. Do you run?" I didn't reply. Yesterday, she caught me near the copier. "You know, Daniel," she said, "I think we make a great team. We should explore that dynamic beyond the constraints of office life." I calmly told her I preferred to keep my professional and personal life completely separate. That night, the message about her apartment and my performance review came in. I walked over to the window and stared down at Grant Park. I'd given 9 solid years to this company, 9 years of building trust, earning respect, and maintaining a flawless record. I had outlasted 3 directors, 2 department-wide overhauls, and more compliance updates than I can count. And I wasn't going to let this derail everything I had worked for. Something told me Thursday wouldn't be the conclusion. It would be the beginning. I built my career at Stratford Media one deliberate move at a time. Started off in the records room at 20, took night classes to earn my compliance certifications, spent weekends memorizing dense legal frameworks most people couldn't stand to read. But I had a knack for details. I could spot irregularities where others saw nothing. I knew how to shield the company from costly legal risks. My father used to say, "Do your work right, keep your head low, and people will take notice." He was a mechanic for 4 decades, never once got a single customer complaint. I carried that mindset into every project I handled. No shortcuts, no excuses. Just dependable, disciplined work the top brass could rely on. Our previous director, Eleanor White, had been more than a boss. She was my mentor. She retired 8 months ago. I had quietly hoped I might be next in line for her position. But the execs decided they wanted fresh leadership, someone from outside the firm. It stung. Still, I chose to stay committed. I figured I'd prove myself to whoever they brought in. In the beginning, Alyssa seemed competent, asked insightful questions, reviewed workflows thoroughly, offered some valid suggestions for improvement. I respected her credentials and gave her my full support. But during our third one-on-one, the tone shifted. She asked if I had family in Chicago, asked if I was married. When I told her I was single and focused on work, I noticed something in her demeanor change. She leaned in, became warmer, more attentive. And I began noticing a pattern. She scheduled our meetings later in the day. Most evenings, once most of the office had cleared out, she'd stay behind, closing her office door even during conversations that didn't require any privacy. She began praising my work in front of the team, but in ways that felt excessive, overly personal, uncomfortable. One afternoon, my colleague Derek leaned over and said, "Alyssa really seems to value what you bring to the table, Daniel. She mentions you often during leadership calls." I laughed it off, tried to downplay it. But deep down, I knew something was off. The text messages made it crystal clear. This wasn't about performance metrics or mentorship. This was personal, and it was stepping over lines that should never be blurred. I'd seen something like this before, at my previous job. A manager misusing their position, mistaking power for permission. Back then, the target was a woman in the accounting department. She eventually filed a complaint, received a settlement, but also had to walk away from her career. Fair or not, the damage was done. I didn't want that to be me. I liked my work. I was good at it. I had built professional trust with auditors, regulators, and industry peers. Leaving Stratford would mean starting all over, rebuilding everything from scratch, while hoping quiet rumors didn't follow me. But staying meant dealing with Alyssa Caldwell, and after the invitation to her apartment, I knew this wouldn't fade quietly. That Thursday night, I drove home with every conversation playing in my head, like a slow, uncomfortable movie. Every text, every moment over the last 6 months. The apartment message sat in my phone like a piece of evidence I wished I didn't have. I didn't go. Instead, I replied with one sentence, "Thanks, but I'd prefer to keep performance reviews during business hours at the office." Her response came quickly. "I think you misunderstood, Daniel. This was about helping you grow professionally." I didn't answer. Friday morning felt different. Alyssa was polite but distant during our team meeting. She avoided eye contact. Most of her questions were directed at others. When I presented my audit report, she gave a half nod and moved right along. After the meeting, Derek pulled me aside. "Everything all right between you and Alyssa? She seemed a little off." I told him everything was fine, but I knew better. The air had shifted, and not in my favor. I had turned her down. Now, I'd have to face the fallout. The weekend gave me time to think. I reviewed everything: my employment agreement, past performance reviews, and my record with Stratford. 9 years of solid work, 0 infractions, 2 formal recognitions from the regulatory board for excellence in audit compliance. If she planned to make a move against me, she'd need a reason, one that couldn't be traced back to Thursday night. Monday morning arrived. At 9:42 a.m., she sent out a department-wide message: mandatory meeting at 10 a.m. Odd. Our regular check-ins were always on Wednesday afternoons. I entered the conference room and saw Derek, Patricia from Risk, and Tom from Legal already seated. Then Alyssa walked in, folder in hand. Serious expression. "I've been evaluating our department structure," she began, "and I believe we need to adapt to meet the company's shifting priorities." My stomach tightened. Effective immediately, we're restructuring the compliance unit. Our focus will move toward digital publishing regulations, reducing oversight on traditional print processes. She opened the folder and pulled out documents. "Daniel, your current role no longer aligns with the department's new direction. Your position will be phased out, effective this Friday. Silence. Derek blinked, stunned. Patricia didn't look up. Tom shifted in his seat, but said nothing. Inside me, something broke. Not anger, not fear. Something colder, sharper. Clarity. Understood, I said quietly. Will there be a transition window? 1 week, she replied. HR will walk you through the exit details. I stood, shook her hand. Thank you for the opportunity, Alyssa. Her grip was steady, but I caught something in her eyes. Maybe relief. Or maybe a victory she thought was final. I returned to my office, closed the door, sat down at my computer. There was still work to do, just not the kind she expected. That Monday afternoon, I began organizing my files and preparing for what came next. They'd likely want an exit interview. Standard questions. What was it like working under Alyssa Caldwell? Did you feel supported in your role? I could mention the boundary-crossing behavior, but without concrete evidence, it would be my word against hers. And after what happened in that meeting, I had no illusions about who held the power now. On Tuesday morning, I scheduled a meeting with Helen Chang, the Director of Human Resources. I'd known Helen for 6 years. She was fair, meticulous, and usually stood behind employees who followed the right process. When I explained what had happened, her eyebrows lifted. I'm honestly surprised, Daniel, she said. Your performance history has always been solid. I've seen the reviews myself. What justification did Alyssa give for this restructuring? I measured my words. I believe personal dynamics may have influenced the decision. Alyssa has repeatedly crossed professional lines with me over the past several months. Helen leaned forward slightly. Can you be specific? I told her about the personal remarks, the after-hours texts, the apartment invitation. I kept my voice even. Just facts. No speculation about motives. Do you have documentation? She asked. Some, I nodded. Mainly text messages. Let's set up a follow-up meeting to go through it carefully. Can you come in Thursday afternoon? I agreed. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the system would work. Maybe this time, crossing the line would have consequences. But that hope didn't last. Wednesday morning, I arrived at my office to find I couldn't log into my computer. My company email had been deactivated. Derek met me at my desk, looking uneasy. She called an emergency team meeting after you left yesterday, he said in a hushed voice. Alyssa told everyone you'd made inappropriate comments during your last review, and that Stratford needed to act fast to protect itself from any legal exposure. My body went cold. What kind of comments? She claimed you made a pass at her, and when she turned you down, you became aggressive. She framed the termination as mutual, an agreement to avoid further issues. The floor felt like it tilted beneath me. She had flipped everything. Now I was the problem. I was the threat. I looked at Derek. You've worked beside me for 4 years. Do you really believe I'd do something like that? He hesitated. I don't want to believe it, but she seemed shaken, and she mentioned conversations that sounded specific. It hit me like a punch. She had twisted our interactions, rewritten the story. My refusals were now recast as threats, my professionalism painted as predatory. She had turned herself into the victim, and me into the danger. It was calculated, ruthless, and terrifyingly effective. I walked straight to Helen's office. Her demeanor had changed. I'm sorry, Daniel, she said, her voice more guarded than before. Given the allegations that have been brought forward, we believe it's best to expedite your departure. Your final day will be today. What allegations? I can't discuss specifics, but there have been concerns raised about your behavior. I tried to explain. but it was clear. Helen was no longer the objective HR director weighing evidence. She was now the company's shield. Her job was no longer to understand. It was to protect the firm. "I'd recommend you collect your personal belongings and complete the necessary paperwork. Security will accompany you when you're ready." The words barely registered. I walked back to my office like I was underwater. 9 years of trust, respect, and credibility, gone in under 24 hours. As I passed desks, Derek couldn't meet my eyes. Patricia whispered something to Tom, and they both glanced away. The story had taken root. There was no space for facts anymore, just the version people had already accepted. I packed my few belongings into a box. A framed photo of my parents, my certifications, a coffee mug I'd gotten after a successful audit. Everything else stayed. It wasn't mine anymore. The security guard was courteous, but didn't waver. He walked beside me to the elevator, stood silently as the doors closed. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes, staring at the building, trying to process how completely I had been outplayed. Alyssa Caldwell had destroyed my reputation. But in doing so, she made one fatal mistake. She assumed I would just accept it. That night, I cleared my dining room table, spread out everything. 9 years of performance reviews, commendations, email threads, printed project records, and my phone. With 6 months of text messages. From her, I needed clarity. I had to understand what really happened, and why. As I walked through the timeline of events, a pattern began to emerge. It became unmistakable the deeper I looked. Alyssa's inappropriate behavior had intensified right after my 3rd performance review back in October. That review had been stellar. I had successfully led the regulatory audit project, an initiative that saved Stratford Media nearly $200,000 in potential penalties. Senior leadership had even acknowledged my work publicly during a town hall meeting. But October wasn't just about a glowing review. I remember Derek casually mentioning that Alyssa had asked several personal questions about me during a leadership strategy session. Questions about my education, career background, and even my relationship status. At the time, I brushed it off as a new director, trying to understand her team better. Now, I saw it for what it was, a screening process. She wasn't just evaluating my skills, she was testing something else entirely. I decided to reach out to someone I trusted, Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer had worked at Loomer Publishing before moving to a competitor nearly a year and a half ago. She had worked closely with Janet Morrison, the former department head. If anyone could shed light on what happened behind the scenes during the leadership transition, it was her. "I've been expecting your call," Jennifer said when she picked up. "Word travels fast in this industry. I heard they let you go. Honestly, it shocked me." "What exactly did you hear?" I asked. "The official version is, you made advances toward Alyssa, and when she said no, you became aggressive." There was a beat of silence before she added, "But Daniel, I've known you for years. That doesn't sound like you, at all." I told her everything, from the suggestive texts to the apartment invitation, to the way she had flipped the story to destroy my credibility. Jennifer didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she sighed. "That actually makes a lot more sense," she said. "Because, well, Alyssa has a reputation." I felt my stomach turn. "What do you mean?" "She was quietly dismissed from Meridian Financial under similar circumstances. A close friend of mine works there. Apparently, she got involved with someone on her team and retaliated when he tried to end things. Why wasn't that revealed during her hiring at Stratford?" I asked, stunned. "Because it was handled as a clean break, with a non-disclosure agreement attached. Technically, it was labeled a mutual separation for new opportunities. There's no official paper trail of misconduct." It all started to click. Alyssa wasn't new to this game. She had done it before, and she'd only gotten better at it, learning how to frame situations to her advantage and avoid accountability. "Jennifer, do you think your contact at Meridian would be willing to talk?" "I can try asking, but I doubt it. NDAs from companies like that are nearly bulletproof." She paused. "But there might be another way." Jennifer explained that after Alyssa's departure from Meridian, the company had hired a new compliance officer within weeks. That timing strongly hinted that a complaint or legal issue had been filed. "If you can uncover a pattern of misconduct, it strengthens your position dramatically," she told me. "One accusation can be written off as a misunderstanding. 2 or more, that's a different story. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a predator." Those words stayed with me. I spent the next 3 hours deep in research. Alyssa's LinkedIn profile showed a surprising career path. 4 companies in 8 years. For someone at a director level, that was odd. Most professionals in leadership roles hold steady for 3 to 5 years, unless they're being promoted or poached for significantly better opportunities. But Alyssa's transitions didn't look like upward moves. They looked lateral. Same title, same duties, similar salaries. It looked less like she was climbing a ladder and more like she was running from fire. I started compiling contact info for employees from her 2 most recent positions. I knew I'd have to approach delicately. One wrong move, and I could be accused of harassment myself. But I had no choice. If there was a repeat pattern, I had to know. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard about what happened. We should talk. Alex Peterson, former Lumaran employee." I didn't recognize the name, but at that point, I was open to anyone who might offer useful information. Alex had left Lumiere Publishing just 3 months before Alyssa's arrival. We met at a small coffee shop in Cambridge, far enough from the office that we wouldn't be seen. "I left because I saw the writing on the wall," Alex said, sipping his drink. "Janet was being forced out, and the board wanted someone aggressive to shake things up. I'd been there 12 years, and I knew my days were numbered." Alex was in his 50s, analytical, careful with his words. He had been head of archives and records, a man who understood the shifting winds of corporate transitions better than most. But that's not why he had reached out. "That's not the real reason I wanted to speak with you," he said. "I know someone who worked with Alyssa at her previous company," Alex said, leaning in. "And after what she told me, I was relieved I got out when I did." He shared that the contact was a woman named Beth Sullivan, who had worked in human resources at Northwick Ventures, the company Alyssa had been with before joining Stratford Media. According to Alex, Beth had been directly involved in handling what she called a deeply troubling incident involving Alyssa and a male coworker. "Beth is willing to talk," he added, "but not over the phone. She insists on meeting in person, and she wants your word. This conversation can't be traced back to her." I agreed to the terms without hesitation. 2 days later, Beth and I met discreetly at a quiet restaurant in Providence, Rhode Island. She arrived early, visibly uneasy but clearly determined to speak the truth. "She targeted a guy named Kevin Torres," Beth began, cutting straight to the point. "The pattern was almost identical to what you described. Personal remarks, late-night messages, and invitations that crossed professional boundaries. When Kevin reported the behavior to Beth's department, she had immediately started an internal inquiry. I documented everything, but somehow Alyssa found out about the complaint, and she struck first. Alyssa had preemptively filed her own complaint, accusing Kevin of harassment. She twisted the narrative, using text exchanges where Kevin had replied to her flirtations and presenting them as proof of inappropriate behavior on his part. I clenched my coffee cup, furious and stunned. "So, what happened to Kevin?" Beth looked down. "It got worse. The company decided both of them were a liability. They terminated both." Kevin lost his job and his professional credibility. Alyssa, on the other hand, negotiated an exit package. She walked away with a glowing reference letter in exchange for not filing a lawsuit against the company. Where's Kevin now? He moved to Oregon, changed industries entirely. The whole thing shattered his trust in corporate life. Beth reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. "I can't give you official records," she said, "but before I left Northwick Ventures, I made personal copies of my investigation notes. They might help you show a consistent pattern." I flipped through the documents. The resemblance to my own situation was unmistakable. The same escalation, the same retaliation tactics, the same strategic distortion of the truth. "Beth, would you be willing to make a formal statement, something written?" She shook her head slowly. "Not officially, but if this ever goes to court, and if the conditions are right, I'd be open to speaking with your attorney, off the record, under the right protections." I drove back to Boston that night with something I hadn't felt in days: resolve. For the first time since losing my job, I had clarity. I wasn't just the victim of a toxic manipulation. I had real proof that Alyssa had done this before. And now, I had documentation. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed a plan. That evening, I reached out to 3 employment lawyers and scheduled consultations for the upcoming week. I also began reconstructing every encounter I could remember: notes, messages, calendar events, anything that could help build a timeline. This wasn't damage control anymore. This was a legal case. I was taking the offensive. My attorney, David Kim, spent nearly 2 hours going through everything: screenshots of text messages, accounts from witnesses like Beth, and a clear timeline showing Alyssa's behavior and her retaliatory actions the moment she was confronted. "You've got a serious case," David finally said. "We're looking at sexual harassment, wrongful termination, and defamation." What stood out most, he explained, was the pattern of misconduct. Multiple employers, repeated incidents. That kind of pattern changes everything in the eyes of investigators and courts. "What's the next step?" I asked. "We file a formal complaint with the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Simultaneously, we notify Stratford Media's legal team. Trust me, corporations hate surprises. But more than that, they fear bad publicity." David went to work on a comprehensive demand letter. It outlined everything: Alyssa's inappropriate conduct, my wrongful termination, and referenced the similar incidents at Northwick Ventures and Meridian Financial. We were no longer waiting for justice. We were coming for it. The letter David drafted was bold and uncompromising. It demanded my immediate reinstatement, full back pay, compensation for the harm done to my reputation, and termination of Alyssa Caldwell for cause. "We're giving them 7 days to respond," David said firmly. "If they ignore this or try to deflect, we'll move forward with an EEOC filing and prepare for litigation." But they didn't ignore it. Just 3 days later, David received a phone call from Stratford Media Group's corporate legal department. They wanted to set up a meeting, to talk formally. "That was quicker than I expected," David told me, "which means they're taking this seriously." The meeting was held in Stratford's executive boardroom. David and I sat across the table from their corporate attorney, a serious woman named Helen Chang, alongside Human Resources Director Karen Rhodes and CEO Patricia Hendress. The company's legal counsel spoke first. "We've reviewed Mr. Carter's claims thoroughly," she began. "We take these matters seriously, and we've conducted our own internal investigation." Then Patricia Hendris spoke. "During the course of our inquiry, we uncovered other inconsistencies in Ms. Caldwell's decision-making and leadership behavior. As of this morning, Alyssa Caldwell is no longer employed by Stratford Media Group." Helen Chang shifted slightly in her chair, still composed, but clearly uncomfortable. "We'd like to offer Mr. Carter his position back, with full benefits restored, and all back pay issued for the time he was separated." David leaned in, calm but firm. "That addresses the employment issue. But what about the damage done to his professional reputation, and the emotional trauma this situation has caused?" The negotiation stretched on for nearly 2 hours. But by the time we left that building, I had walked out with far more than just my job. The following Monday morning, I returned to my desk at Stratford Media Group, this time with a signed settlement agreement in hand. It included full reinstatement, 6 months of back pay, a formal written apology from the company, and a significant financial settlement for the damage I had endured. When I arrived, Derek was already waiting at my workstation, smiling warmly. "Welcome back, Daniel," he said. "I never believed a single word of those accusations. Thanks, Derek. That really means a lot." Later that morning, Patricia from Risk Management stopped by. She looked slightly ashamed, but sincere. "Daniel, I owe you an apology. I should have said something when Alyssa announced your termination. Something about it felt off. I regret staying silent." Alyssa's departure was handled quietly. The internal company bulletin said only that she had chosen to pursue new opportunities. No mention of misconduct, no note of a termination for cause. But in the professional world, especially when attorneys get involved, stories travel faster than official memos. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Kevin Torres. Beth Sullivan had told him about the outcome of my case. "I just wanted to say thank you," Kevin said. "I heard what happened with Alyssa at Stratford. For years, I hoped someone would finally hold her accountable." "How have you been?" I asked. "Better," he replied. "Started my own consulting business. Took time, but I rebuilt myself. I'm in a much better place now." 6 months after returning to Stratford, I was promoted to Director of Compliance, the very role Alyssa had once occupied. The irony wasn't lost on me. Because of the confidentiality clause in my agreement, I never shared the financial terms of the settlement. But I kept in touch with Beth and Kevin. Over time, we formed a quiet network, a group of professionals who knew what it meant to stand up against manipulation and abuse of power. I still work at Stratford Media Group. I still take pride in the details, the procedures, the discipline that makes a company strong. But now, I've learned something far more valuable than compliance protocols. I've learned the power of documentation, the necessity of speaking up, and the importance of never staying silent when someone crosses a professional line. Some battles are exhausting, but some battles are worth every ounce of the fight. Because when people stay silent, predators continue.